today's webinar, Why You Should Upgrade to SDL Tridion Docs 13 SP1. My name is Kate and I'll be your host. Today's speakers are Frank Klossep, Head of R&D for SDL Tridion DX, and Joe Pearman, Senior Product Manager for SDL Tridion Docs. We're expecting today's webinar to last around 45 minutes, followed by a Q&A session. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please pop them into the Q&A box and we'll be sure to answer them at the end of the webinar. I'll now pass you over to Frank to introduce himself.
Thanks, Kate. So my name is Frank Klossep. I used to be the product manager for Tridion Docs, but just recently I took over the responsibility for the entire development team for Tridion DX, which basically means both Tridion Docs and Tridion Sites. So that's our other web content management system in our portfolio. We also have Joe. So Joe, and he will introduce himself later on, but he's basically my replacement on the product management side. So Joe, do you want to say hi?
Hi, everyone.
All right. So let's get into what we want to discuss. So we just recently launched Tridion Docs 13 SP1. During today's webinar, I will just explain you all the new features that we have added in Tridion Docs 13, because we know that not a lot of customers have upgraded, and also introduce the SP1 additions that we have made to the products. Now, as you see here, so today customer experience lack of DX, which stands for digital experience continuity. So basically that means that today still most online channels are not providing the best possible user experiences. Many times in my own personal experience, when I was trying to solve a problem for a device that I have bought, so I was going to the website of the vendor, and it was not helping me much. It was providing me with a lot of information that was not relevant. It was not remembering what I was doing on the website. And at the end of the day, I couldn't solve my problem, so I was not finding the answer to my question. So typically, that's still what we see in a lot of different locations, that content is being created in different silos inside the organization. And this, in a sense, makes it very hard for users to find the right answer to the question that they have. It's important to understand that basically your customers are not just going to the marketing site, nor will they be going just to your online shop to buy stuff, nor will they just visit the customer support area. They will touch any of this content at any point in their journey, basically. It basically, so for example, to give you a few examples, when users are making decisions to buy a product, so they will do an investigation up front, they will go to your website, they will look at the marketing material, and that all looks nice, right? But most often, and I think the stats are saying in 80% of the cases, people will also visit the technical data sheets because they would like to understand the details of the product that they're buying. So it basically means that technical documentation can be a make or break decision point for that customers, whether they will buy our product or not. So the marketing content needs to be connected in a very good way to your support content. At the same time, for example, you might be a long-term customer, and that what I was explaining with my own experience. I have an issue with the product. I will go on site to fix my issue. But basically, as a company, you would like to upsell new stuff to the customer as well. So that means that the e-commerce experience needs to be connected to the product experience. And this is basically what we have been focusing on last year. So I would like to introduce dynamic experience delivery and DXA. And this is what we had before. So typically in most companies, product and support documentation, they are made available through some web portals. But most of the time they have a completely visual, different experience from the marketing side. They have different navigation experience from the marketing sites. And basically that tells you that most of the systems that are being used are often disconnected. They're delivering the different types of information to the end user in a disconnected way. And we at SDL, we were basically not different, because this was the situation last year where both Tridion Sites and Tridion Docs two separate delivery environments. We had live content reach for the Tridion Docs side, and we had the content delivery services on the Tridion site side, right, which is basically our web content management system. So that is something that we have fixed, and the future state will bring those two closer together. And we are therefore introducing what we call dynamic experience delivery. And that is basically a platform that is sitting on top of Tridion Docs and Tridion Sites content repositories, and it will allow you to start blending the experience between the pre-sale and the post-sale material. Maybe one note I need to make. Tridion Docs already adopted the new platform. For Tridion Sites, it's a bit different, and that will be available in November 2018. But from that time on, you can start really blending the experience between pre- and post-sale material. So this, from a high-level architectural point of view, this is how it will look like. So you have Tridion Docs and Tridion Sites as two content management systems, one for technical documentation and one for web content management system. And SDL Tridion DX is basically bringing two things together, right? So it enables companies to create and manage continuous personal digital experiences on a global scale across the entire customer journey from pre-sale through post-sale. So you can also see on this slide that language solutions is underpinning the entire solution because, well, language is in our DNA. So it also means that if you want to support your customers worldwide, you also need to bring the language aspect into account. Maybe a quick introduction on the DXA for dynamic documentation. DXA, by the way, stands for Digital Experience Accelerator. And what we have done is that we are delivering an out-of-the-box documentation portal that can serve up dynamic content, and which is basically built on that new delivery stack. Because the implementation of a site or a documentation portal, most of the time, if you start doing it, it's often long and costly. It will take some time to get it all online. So we have put some substantial effort in removing that hurdle. And what we are doing out of the box is that we are delivering a production-ready documentation portal. It's driven by best practices and industry standards out of the box. So it gives you a very good basis to start from. It is extensible. So, for example, if you don't have a lot of requirements, it's pretty easy to start changing the color scheme or changing some widgets on the page or adding your own logo to it, of course. So that is all very, very easy. But you can do a lot more things with it. So it's very extensible. We have taken extensibility into account right from the start. The out-of-the-box experience that we're delivering is also dynamic. So you can filter your documentation on the fly based on the profile of the customer that is visiting it. And it's also adaptive in terms of mobile design first. And it's also device independent, of course. The other thing to mention here is that we will continue to evolve the experience of the out-of-the-box web application that we're delivering. It's also important to understand that we will be open sourcing this all, and that we do have a big community behind DXA that is actively participating in making this better. Now, if I drill into high-level features. So the first thing, of course, navigation. So it has a look and feel of a normal documentation portal. You can see the table of contents on the left-hand side. You can see the content on the right-hand side. But out of the box, we have added a number of levels of navigation. So basically, out of the box, you will be able to navigate to your documentation based on which product family does it belong to, but also which product release it belongs to. As you know, in technical documentation, you might have, and you will have, most of the customers do have, multiple releases in the field at the same time. So it's important that you can serve your customer for their specific version of the product that they are using. Yeah. So basically, even though this basic navigation, it's very restricted, as I said before, it's product family and product release. In a real-life scenario, this will probably not be the case. So we also made it extensible enough that, for example, if you have an enterprise taxonomy management system in-house, you can also connect it to that. so that your taxonomy that you're defining for your company can start driving the experience and the navigation. The smart breadcrumbs here is a small thing, but I think it's more usability thing than anything else. So you can see the breadcrumbs here, and the breadcrumbs, they will take into account the space that you have available on the screen, and it will start, instead of wrapping it, because if you have a long path here, well, it's not a good experience then that the breadcrumbs will take up half of your screen. So we made it a bit more smart, and we will hide breadcrumbs behind. Here you can see number 3, so it means that there are 3 more levels included on the screen. Multilingual support. As I said before, language is in our DNA, so this out-of-the-box experience had to be multilingual from the start. So out of the box, we have localized the user interface of the web application in a number of languages: German, English, Dutch, Chinese, and Japanese. But of course, this can be extended to any language that is out there. In order to accommodate languages like Arabic and Hebrew, we also have added right-to-left support out of the box. And the last bullet here is fallback languages. And that basically means that we will always aim to get the required information to the customer in their own language. Now, if their own preferred language is not available in the system, then we will always fall back through the default language. But of course, we will also notify the customer that the documentation is not available in his preferred language. Personalization. As I said before, your documentation can be personalized on the fly depending on the user profile you have. Out of the box, we have added a simple UI where you can basically put your preferences in. For example, am I a novice user? Am I an administrator? If you're a software development company, you might have examples in .NET or Java. So you do have a simple screen where people can put in their preferences in terms of how the documentation needs to be personalized on the fly. Again, in a real-life scenario, this might need to be extended, so we also have the extensibility points in the application so that you can basically connect it to any system that is providing you with necessary context. For example, if a user logs in, you could connect it to a CRM system or a PLM system so that at least you know who is the customer, which are the products that they have bought from us in the past, which are the features on the product that they have bought, and you can use all that information to personalize that on the fly. This is something what we call the Ambient Data Framework. So the Ambient Data Framework is basically responsible for capturing the context of that user, and that can be hooked up to any external system that is out there just to personalize the documentation to the needs of the customer. A support portal would not be a support portal if you wouldn't have search. So we have included Elasticsearch as our backend. We did provide a very simple user interface to start looking for the information in our system. It can be system-wide, but you could also scope it down to the context of one single publication. Faceted search is not included in the out-of-the-box UI at this moment in time, but that doesn't mean that the underlying platform is not supporting it. We just didn't put it into the UI, but this is still very high up in our priority list to get that in the out-of-the-box web application as soon as possible. We also added capabilities to connect this to external search engines like Google and Bing, so that they would be capable of searching your documentation in our platform as well, that they can index it. But for example, also we have the mechanisms. So if you have an internal enterprise-wide search solution that you would like to leverage as well, we also have the capabilities, for example, to ingest our content into the index of those search solutions as well. Next, one up is customer feedback, because we feel it's very important that when people are reading through your documentation that you need to be able to capture feedback on the documentation. Not just on the documentation itself, it might be on the documentation, it might be also on the feature set that is delivered, but the round-tripping of information between the customer and yourselves and your technical documentation team is crucial, in my opinion, just to start improving the documentation. Authentication at this moment in time is not provided out of the box, because you do have a lot of different flavors of authentication. You can use OAuth. Some people might prefer to have an authentication through Facebook or through Google Plus or whatever. But we have built into the application that you can extend it to use any authentication mechanism that is out there, basically. Yeah. Then, of course, once you get the feedback, you also need to get the feedback back into your own organization, to the technical writing teams that originally created the content. So we also created the new customer feedback dashboard, as we call it. And there you can see all the comments that were coming in. You can reply to comments so that you can start really engaging with your customer that originally made the comments, because at the end of the day, if a customer takes the time to provide comments on your documentation and they will never hear back from you, again, that is not a good user experience. And that's what I'm saying. Round tripping of information, keeping in touch and keep responding to your customer is key in this sense as well. So you can get a full list of the comments coming in. You can filter them based on dates. You can filter them based on language. You can filter them based on in which publications they were made on. So there are a number of filters just to dig down and drill down into the details of the comments that you are interested in. Lastly, these were just run through the features. I would also like to highlight that the entire platform is based on a microservices architecture. It's pretty scalable, it's cloud-friendly. We do have a number of microservices which are pretty isolated. For example, the discovery service. That is an important one, because if you would like to have automatic scaling of your application, well, you only need to specify one endpoint. You only have to specify this is where your site is living, and it doesn't matter if you add servers, if you add whatever, just to make it more scalable. You can scale it up and down automatically. We don't need to change configuration. The content service, that's basically the main piece of it. That is basically to get the information out, and you can also use those APIs by yourself. So if you want to do something else with it, if you want to consume the content in different applications, then you can also start using those microservices. One important one here is the contextual image delivery service. Basically, we do keep a database of all the devices out there. We know what is the screen size of those things. And we do have the capabilities, for example, if you are serving up an image, a large image, to a mobile device with a bad network connection, for example, you can also scale up, you can scale down those images so that we are delivering those images faster to the local device, and that you will get a good user experience on that one. Yeah. So basically, that was the DXA for dynamic documentation. I think this has been a major step forward for us. As I said before, in November, Sites 9, so the Sites to Web Content Management software will also start using it, and then you can start really blending post-sales and pre-sales material together in a seamless way. Yeah. So collaborative review. We did spend a lot of time on improving collaborative review based on the feedback that we were getting from our customers. We have made a lot of small changes which are not included inside this presentation, but to give you an example is that if you have, for example, security set up in the content management piece, then we're respecting the security also on the collaborative review side. Because you might have highly confidential information about a new product launch which needs to be reviewed by X number of people, but it cannot be visible to the entire organization yet. So that will be possible going forward as well. Also, some small editorial improvements in our online editor have been made. As I said before, it's not specified in this presentation, but we can give you a full overview if you would like to see that. Yeah. Basically, the feedback we were getting from our customers was that it was not always intuitive what individual SMEs or reviewers had to review. So in the past, in the previous version, you basically had to send an email, you had to list all the pages that were required for them to review or to contribute on, and that was basically not very user-friendly. So today, in the new release, we will provide users with a list of pages that needs to be reviewed. They can simply click a link, and the page will be opened in context for them to review, make comments on, or to contribute on. Next, you can also review, basically you can also change so here you can see on the right-hand side on the screenshot that is provided, you can also start updating the metadata of that specific topic. So for example, if you feel that this topic doesn't need to be reviewed by you, but by someone else, you can specify a different reviewer. You can also specify whether you have reviewed the content, yes or no, and in order to advance it in the workflow. Yeah. And on top of the page, so once you have reviewed this page, there is also a button available so that with a simple click, it will bring you to the next page in this document, which might be 200 pages down in the document. So with a simple click on a button, you will jump to the next page that requires your attention. And in our feeling, this will be a major time saving when reviewing the documents. Another thing that we were getting a lot of requests on is that it had to be easier to add new topics for SMEs. So when you were creating your documents, so here you can see a table of contents, DITA map in technical terms. In the previous release, when you would like to add a new topic to this, it requires like 7 million clicks. You first had to go to the repository, you had to create a new topic at the desired location in the repository, then you had to go back to the editor, you had to navigate or search for the topic that you have just created, and only then you were able to insert it at the right location in the document. Right? And of course, this required way too many clicks in order to be useful. In the new release, it is possible to create new topics when modifying the table of contents directly, right there in the editor, and you don't need to leave your editor. Right? So you can simply select a new topic. You will get an overview with all the available templates that are available. You can select a template. Next question that it will ask you is to provide the mandatory metadata, and in this case it's just the title. But there is also an option, if you would like to specify more metadata, that you will expand the metadata, you will get a full overview of the metadata. And again, so I described the previous procedure that was very time consuming, so this will be a major time saving for our users. The same is true for images and replacing images by SMEs. So we had similar issues when you were doing that. In case you want to upload a different version of an image to the repository, for example, way too many clicks were needed to get your job done. Today, again, you don't need to leave the editor. You can just do it right there. You can basically browse your file system to select your image, one or more images, or you can use drag and drop to drop the images in there and then use them right away in your documents. So all in all, I think major improvements in collaborative review, things that we have been hearing for quite some time, and I'm happy to see them into the product at this moment in time. Enhanced productivity. And I think this one, the first one, is one of the main reasons. So even though you're not using dynamic delivery, for example, or you're not using collaborative review, I think what we have done here is basically very, very good and very compelling for users to make a decision to upgrade to the latest Tridion Docs 13 SP1 release. So we have done a complete overhaul of the publishing chain. So some things that we're doing is we are exporting only what is required. So for example, if complete chapters are dropped because of the conditional filtering that we're doing, we're not exporting them anymore. We are making it it's multi-threaded, the export. And from the numbers that you can see here, so we have done tests, and these will always come with a disclaimer, right? Because the test, it will always depend on the hardware that you're using, but also on the complexity of your data. So if you have millions of conrefs in there, then well, the data is more complex and you might see different numbers. But still, overall, it's major performance improvements that we were seeing on our test cases. So for example, for 5,000 files, you can see that the new publishing chain is performing 2 times better. Exporting 25,000 files, it went 3 times faster. And if we were having publications of 65,000 files, it even went up to 9 times faster, which is basically pretty impressive. We have done a webinar, so if you are interested in more details on this and also on the technical details about what we have done for the publishing chain, we did do a webinar a few weeks ago, and if you want to find more information, then I will invite you to go to our YouTube channel or even on our community site, so community.sdl.com. There you can find the previous recording of those webinars. Then we also did the improvements to our integrations with our language products. So there is SDL Translation Management System and also SDL World Server. And I will just skip quickly through this flow. But basically the thing that we have done is, in the previous release, we were not always synchronizing the workflow statuses between the two systems in the correct way. So for example, when you were canceling a job in TMS or in World Server, we were not canceling the job in Tridion Docs or vice versa, right? Leaving the impression that everything was still under translation, although the translation job might have been canceled. The other thing that we have changed is when you were canceling a job, then the status information in Tridion Docs was not updated. You would see that all the topics were still in a status called in translation, leaving you again with the false impression that everything was in translation, although the job was cancelled. So in this release, we will make sure that all the status information is synchronized properly, and if you cancel a job, then we will also roll back the status of the individual topics into a status to be translated so that you at least know that they are no longer in the translation management system. The other thing that we have done is that we have focused on, we introduced a translation review cycle. It was not really supported in the previous version. So this means that basically translation today will go into a review step. That will allow people to generate a PDF or any other format so that you basically could send your sales company for some additional linguistic review or for accuracy or whatever. So you can generate a PDF for intermediate review mid translation, basically. It also means that the translation at that time will not be committed in the translation memory because they're still being reviewed. And it's only after they have been approved in either Tridion Docs in TMS or in World Server that we will start committing those translations in the translation memory. Now, for some companies that might not be important, but it is important for the companies that we have in the pharmaceutical vertical and the life science space. That was a big deal because they have compliance rules that they need to adhere to. The last thing that we have done is that in the past, when you, for example, had the translation coming back from World Server and TMS, and for some kind of a reason the translation was not good enough and you were rejecting it, we were not sending that automatically back to TMS, right? The process that you had to follow is that you had to create a new translation job, you had to add the topics that you have just rejected, you had to submit it back to World Server or TMS. There you had the authorization phase that you had to go through. So there were a lot of things that you still had to do just to get a few pages that you have rejected translated. In the new version of the system, whenever you reject something, we will send it over automatically to TMS and World Server again, and we will also send it back to the exact same translator, right? Because he or she translated the content in the first place, so it's important that he or she sees why we are rejecting the translation. So I think a lot of good features that we have added into the integration here as well. The last thing on the enhanced productivity might look like a small thing, but I think it's a big thing for a lot of our users. So we do have a lot of list views in our tooling. So you have the baseline, you have the different repository views, you have inboxes, they all come with list views. Beforehand, you always had to configure the information that was visible in those list views at system setup. In case that you wanted to have some additional metadata to be visible on there, you had to go through our professional services team. It will take them some time to implement it. It meant a change on your system. Of course, you had to pay for that. And that's not very user-friendly because every user at the end of the day is different. They all want to see different information. So we have changed that, and we have put the capability in there that every user can basically select whatever metadata they want to see. Yeah, that also means that we will persist that on the user profile. So every user can have different views into the repository and into the data that is visible on their screen. But also more things that we have done. So for example, which are the columns that are visible? The order columns. So if you change them, we will persist them. If you change the width of a column in those list views, we will persist that on the user profile as well, right? And also the sorting of the columns. So everything people are doing, they have more capabilities, they have more control over what they are seeing, and we will persist it on the user's profile specifically. That also comes to the advantage that you don't, so whenever you upgrade the system, for example, we don't have to merge those changes anymore because everything is stored on the user profile. On the technical front, and I will not go into great deal of details here, but we have focused a lot on making the configuration simpler. We simplified and centralized the configuration of metadata. Right, so in the past, you had to configure the web clients differently from the desktop clients that we have, and that all has been centralized into one single configuration method. We also spend a lot of time in creating the necessary tools in order to update or automate the upgrade process better. But we will have a separate webinar on that on July 18th. So if you're technical and if you're involved in upgrades, I would like to invite you to that webinar. Again, to make upgrades and installation procedures more simple, we have simplified the installers where people in the past had to specify 34 parameters. We reduced them to 1. We merged the number of tools, so for example, the database upgrade tool and the metadata setup tool, we combined them in one thing, and you can also automate that at this moment in time. So a lot of focus has been gone into making it easier to upgrade customers into the latest release. Then on a side note, a PowerShell automation toolkit. So it's basically an equivalent of the web services API that we have today, but then through PowerShell. So if you have a technical team, you would like to get some reporting out of the system, you would like to, for example, manage your users in an easier way, if you would like to build your documentation or generate your documentation in PDF on a nightly basis, those can all be done through the PowerShell automation toolkit. Again, we will have a webinar on this June 20th, so next week, Wednesday, where we will walk you through the basics of PowerShell, so how to get started, some simple scripts that you can write to get some simple things done into the system, but also the other use case that we will provide you is how can you get, for example, the data out of the system to start generating some reports and metrics, and that has been a long-heard request in the past. We have done 64-bit support for all the desktop clients, and Java 10 support is in there as well. So 64-bit support for all the desktop tools. That also has an implication for the authoring tools. So we are supporting the latest versions of the authoring tools. So Oxygen 20, Arbortext 7.1 is supported, and XMetal 12 and 12J. Unfortunately, just before the release, XMetal came out with XMetal 13. So we're lagging behind still, but that was just an unfortunate coincidence because they just released when we were releasing as well. Yeah, and then all the other desktop clients are 64-bit, providing you with some examples. For example, if you have very large imports, and we have customers importing millions of files through 64-bit, you will have a bigger memory footprint in the application, and you will not run into issues in that sense anymore. Now, if you are ready to upgrade, so who should you contact? So we have the engagement office, which is basically part of the professional services team. And I just, for the sake of your information, so if you are ready, if you want to have a more deep dive into the features, if you would like to do an upgrade scan, so what it means for you to upgrade, then I suggest that you reach out to the people listed here on the screen. So that's Kelman in North America, that is Henk in Europe and Middle East, and we have Trivikram in APAC. So reach out to them, and they can definitely help you moving forward with the upgrade process. And by this, I would like to hand it over to Joe Perriman, who will give a quick introduction. He just joined the team. I'm pretty happy with Joe joining, but I will give the floor to Joe now.
Thank you, Frank. So yeah, as Frank said, I've been in SDL since April now, so not that long, but I do have a good background in docs actually. So I was in HTC before, so the smartphone manufacturers, and now virtual reality manufacturers in Taiwan. And in HTC, I led the team that basically chose and implemented docs. And we did lots of exciting things with it. So we customized it quite a lot, did some custom reporting. I think we were one of the first people to use web services to do that. Also, we built several iterations of tools to basically pump content into the corporate CMS. So very, very happy to see what we're doing now in terms of content mashups and the available DXA architecture, because that would have made things so much easier. And then also we developed our own mobile app on the phones themselves and figured out lots of things in terms of delivering from docs to the mobile app, making sure every device got exactly the right content, fallback languages, and all of these kinds of things. So I did lots of interesting stuff at HTC, and then wanted to kind of move out into the wider world of consulting, but still very much around structured content and DITA. And that's basically what I've been doing for the last 4 years, working with various customers in various verticals, so kind of heavy industry, government, legal, financial, pharmaceutical, all sorts of interesting areas on their specific problems. Helping them solve those, and getting much, as well as structured content, getting quite deep into the field of taxonomy and semantic technology. And obviously had a chance to look around the market. It wasn't all kind of docs projects. There were some that were involved with docs and some others. But really, I always felt it gave me a renewed appreciation really of the concept model behind docs. Things like the baseline features, the versioning, translation, all of these kinds of things are really nice features that you don't tend to find elsewhere. So that's my recent experience. I've also recently taken up playing the trumpet again. So I was a trained classical trumpeter actually as a teenager, and that was going to be my life until basically I took a turn of direction. But I picked up the trumpet again as a hobby, and I'm reading Miles Davis' autobiography. And he says this very interesting thing, is that it's not the notes you play, it's the notes you don't play that are important, basically. And clearly that applies to music. If you think about Miles Davis and that amazing kind of minimal music, and you got any kind of funk, James Brown, what's important is the gaps between the notes. It's not necessarily the notes themselves. And I kind of think this applies also to product management in a sense, in that we don't want to pack the product with every conceivable feature possible and just kind of stick buttons all over the place. We want to make it really focused and do something, the key kind of use cases really, really well. And so that's what we're focusing on. So I just wanted to give an idea of the themes that I'm focusing on in terms of the Docs roadmap and taking things forward. So three big themes that will take us forward over the next few years. One thing is really empowering authors. So I think everybody is probably seeing this trend that yes, of course, it's very important to have full-time technical authors still, but nevertheless, SMEs, engineers, other non-professional writers, if you like, their role is getting more important in creating content. And it seems they need more control over the content itself, and so we need to cater for an experience that they can actually work with. Now, clearly, we've got friendly content editing with Content Editor itself, and it's actually very configurable. I think maybe not everybody realizes how configurable it is, but you can do a lot to tweak the behavior, and it's very nice. But we do have this somewhat separate experience between Content Editor and collaborative review. And when you want to look at a whole document, you are jumping out to the table of contents view and so on. So what we see is that people would like to get a bit more context in one view, a bit more of a Word-like experience. Now, clearly, we don't want to make them think they are editing a Word document as such. You know, Word isn't as powerful as what DITA can do for one thing. But nevertheless, we need a more integrated experience, still friendly, but give people the power of structured content. And then also give people a more comprehensive review functionality. So you get more along the lines of what Word does in terms of suggestions, deletions, and then you get you know, a side panel where you can have a conversation, you can accept, reject, all of this kind of stuff. So working towards kind of easier authoring in some regards, and then looking slightly ahead to perhaps slightly more of a knowledge management problem, in that what everybody finds when they're working with DITA is that it's hard to get really good visibility of what's actually in the system. What have you written before? Was it different? Why was it different? What can you reuse? What actually needs to be different for a good reason because of customer requirements and so on. So working on a new experience to give people a bit more insight into what's been done before and kind of easier reuse capabilities. So that's on the authoring front. Then when it comes to content delivery, very important to keep on making content more findable and relatable. And I think we live in a search-focused world now. So people tend to land on a page from wherever, probably from Google. It could be an internal search, and they need to see certain things there. So actually, there are some easy things we can do to improve search engine optimization because we have the end-to-end platform. You know, we have content creation and delivery, as Frank has just shown. So we can do some enhanced things based on knowing what the different versions of the documents are to tell Google, well, out of all these different versions, we prefer you to show this one at the top. So something we can do to integrate and make a better SEO experience, and a few other tweaks along those lines. But then also very much moving into the idea of what do you see once you're on a page. Can we surface some related content? A bit like the Mashups experience, taking that even further to say, given that I'm on this page, what could we show you that will help you in the next step of your exploration? So typically people reading docs are very motivated. They have a decision they want to make or some information they need about using a product. Sometimes they will get all that on one page, which is great. Sometimes they need to read around the subject. And so just thinking about how we can better power contextual links and content previews really based on taxonomy. And of course, if we're working on taxonomy capabilities, there's all sorts of other applications that can consume this content as well. And once it's tagged semantically, then they can make more sense of it and do exciting things. Just a very simple example. When we talk about kind of Internet of Things in general, let's take a car dashboard. So now you have these kind of electronic dashboards, and you can surface content on those, and it's all kind of voice controlled. So it's no longer kind of slicing up a book and putting it on a website, but it's very targeted chunks of content that will answer the driver's question. So this all relies on some taxonomy and semantic tagging, and these are things that we'll continue to work with. Actually, we already have a very advanced taxonomy connector for people that already have external taxonomy capabilities, which is great, and we will work on just building our capabilities also internally. And then finally, just further building on this contextual connection thing, working with tools for specific verticals. So in pharma, for example, people have particular knowledge management tools that they want to work with. In terms of content delivery, Frank brought up the case of integrating with a CRM, so a customer relationship system. In manufacturing, you've got product information tools, and just making sure we can plug into them cleverly. So we're not trying to do what they do, but make sure we can make the most out of the tools that organizations already have and glue them together cleverly. And that also applies, so Frank touched briefly on getting better analytics out of the system, and indeed the idea of being able to connect better to analytics platforms and get some both internal reuse metrics and then also external user data to further improve the content. And then just finally in that regard, also improving the contextual view that translators get when they're using our language technologies. So you translate content out of docs, and typically at the moment, what you will see in translation management tools is you'll see a single chunk of content without a great deal of context. And so we can work on getting much richer context to let translators know for what they're translating. For example, is it a product manual or whatever, so they can see the whole manual and get some ideas to help them translate this chunk of content better. So it's just a very quick wrap up of the themes that we'll be focusing on over the next couple of years.
Right. Thanks, Joe. Just to wrap up before we go into the Q&A, I just want to inform you that we will be hosting a Tridion Developer Summit in Amsterdam. So here you can see the link to the website if you are interested in coming. It's on the 6th and the 7th of September in Amsterdam. You must know that it will be focused more on the technical topics. So, for example, I've been talking about PowerShell, about DXA, and how, for example, you can extend it or integrate it with different platforms. So it will be pretty much developer-focused and technical-focused. But if you're interested, I think it's a valuable opportunity just to meet with the peers and to start learning. So 6th and 7th in Amsterdam, in case you are interested. And the last thing, we do have our community site, community.sdl.com. If you're not on there, please do, because we're sharing a lot of valuable information in there. We also have an ideas section on there. So if you have a good idea for the products, then you can post it in, and you can start collaborating together with the community to get more feedback on your ID. And at the end of the day, that will help us as well seeing what is living with the customers, what are they struggling with. You can vote for IDs, giving us a bit of a sense of the priorities that we need to look for. Yeah. So questions and answers. There is a question here, Joe. what do you mean by content mashups?
Oh, okay. So this was the slides that Frank had showed earlier, where we're combining marketing content and tech docs, basically in the same experience on the same screen. So that's what we mean by that. And the idea with this, by the way, is that you don't put in kind of hard-coded links between those things, because anybody who's managed a website knows that these links break and are very fragile, but rather that they're actually based on taxonomy, so that you're showing the right tech docs with the right marketing content automatically, and the correct available content will show up. So I hope that helps. Frank, anything to add on that?
No, I think that's a good explanation, Joe. What is included in the basic package corresponding to Live Content Architect without reach today? So beforehand, we have been through a number of name changes, and someone made a comment on that as well. So when will you change the name again? Hopefully not in the near future, to be fairly honest. I'm pretty happy with Tridion Docs and Tridion Insights, so I'll leave it this way for now. But basically, we do have three capabilities in the system, which is structured content management, which corresponds to Live Content Architect. We have collaborative review, which corresponds to Live Content Reach internal, and then we have the dynamic delivery, which corresponds to Live Content Reach external. Right? So we will still be selling those three options capabilities as separate. Of course, the prerequisite is that you have the structured content management piece available. Next question, will you be sending information out for the 2 webinars I was mentioning? Kate, can you handle that question?
Yes, I believe the information about those 2 webinars are actually on the community, so that's the best place to have a look and find that information.
Okay. Next question, can topics be assigned to multiple reviewers so that they can access to be reviewed links in Reach internal? Yes, out of the box it is not the case, but through customization you can set up multiple reviewers in the system, but that requires professional services to set it up for you. Yeah. Another question. So regarding the translation integration, so is reverting to be translated status condition to use of SDL TMS? So no, so it will work in all circumstances. So we have an integration with SDL TMS, integration with SDL World Server. But for example, we also have an option to export the files just on a file system, right? So if you cancel a job, we will roll back the status to be translated no matter what. Will you make the presentation available to us? I'm happy to. I will go through Kate's because she will put the recording and probably also the slides on the community side for you to download them. Hang on, because a lot of questions are coming in. So is this being recorded? Yes, this is being recorded. Hang on. So Frank mentioned that content editor improvements could be presented upon request. Is that already available somewhere? We're working with non-tech docs content owners, and obviously content editors will be key for them. If you can send me an email, then I can give you a list with all the changes that we have made to the content editor. Another question, is there an API available for external vendors to publish output outside of SDL, like an external preview function? I'm not sure that I understand it fully, but you have multiple ways to get content out of the system. You can use the Web Services API to get it. We do have what we call an external preview function, which we are basically using in our integration with SDL TMS and World Server. So that basically you go back to our system and that we will render the preview and then send you the HTML response back so that you can render it into your own application. And the third option would be to use our PowerShell automation toolkit just to get the XML out of the system, but then you will be responsible for applying the style sheets and doing the actual rendering. So I think the best possible way is to use the external preview API that we have available, so that we will render the XML into HTML and send you the HTML response back to you. What is the expectation for how long the upgrade should take? It pretty much depends. The first time around, because we are treating the upgrades as configuration as codes. So basically it means that you will be starting using PowerShell to express your intention. And the intention can be enable this feature, add a button here, add this functionality at that location. Submit, for example, the workflow configuration in that location. Yeah. So basically everything is expressed through PowerShell, but that basically also means that next time you upgrade, well, the scripts will always be backwards compatible. You just need to execute the same scripts, and even though we might be changing stuff on the back end, the scripts will not change, and you can run the upgrades over and over again, and that is all automated. Now that said, from version 12 until version 13, we will probably, you will have to, if you want to take advantage of this, you will have to create those scripts the first time around, right? So that will be some effort that you need to do, but from 13 and onwards, it will become a heck of a lot easier. Yeah. In the same question, you were also asking, I want to use Amazon, so AWS as my host. Do you have experience in this, and how many nodes have you used? Yes, we have, in this effort, we're automating deployments, and that will be touched in the webinar as well. We also have created the tools to start spinning up things in Amazon, new servers, with full failover capabilities. So for example, if you take a server down, then you can see that our servers are taking over. So we have tested with quite a few nodes in Amazon. We could consider doing a presentation or a webinar on that one as well, because it was pretty impressive. With one click of a button, we were getting all the necessary configurations stored in a single source control system, applying the configuration, spinning up like 6 different boxes, 2 batch servers, and that just required one click of a button. So it was pretty impressive, right? What version of Windows is required for SDL Tridion Docs 13? I would need to look that up. So I'm not sure what you mean on the client side or on the server side. But that's something that you can find in our documentation, which is on docs.sdl.com. Go to the release notes, and there you can find the information regarding the platform support that we are doing. And these were more or less all the questions that were available. So maybe one more question, because that question comes up a lot as well. What about DITA 1.3 support? Joe, can you talk about that?
Okay, yeah. So basically we are working on DITA 1.3 supports, and we are looking to make this available, I would say, around about the end of the year, something like that. Frank, does that reflect your perception?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it is coming. Then that's just something I would like to say here as well. So if there are no more questions, then I would like to hand it over to Kate.
Great. Thanks, Frank and Joe, for presenting today, and thanks for attending our webinar. Don't forget to visit the attachments and links sections in this webinar for additional resources. We hope you found today's session useful, and we look forward to welcoming you again on one of our next webinars. Have a great rest of day. Thank you.